Okay, thank you very much, Nkosi. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Resnick. I have the privilege of serving as volunteer chair of the Shady Grove Sector Plan Implementation Advisory Committee. I've been doing so in this voluntary capacity since late last year, if I recall correctly. And with my community colleagues, we are part of the committee that provides oversight, guidance, and advice to Montgomery Planning and others who are collaboratively involved with the completion of the Shady Grove Sector Plan. This evening, we're going to be following our agenda, which you see on the screen. And before we do begin our meeting, I would like to acknowledge that Tanya Stern, Acting Director of Montgomery Planning, is joining us this evening. Ms. Stern, a warm welcome to you, and thank you very, very much for your time this evening, for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you if you want to say a few words. And then I'll introduce your colleague, Carrie Sanders, who also we have the great privilege of welcoming this evening. Ms. Stern.
Great. Thank you so much. And very happy to join you all this evening. Again, my name is Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director with the Montgomery County Planning Department. I have been in this role for about 6 months now. And prior to that, was Deputy Director at the department, overseeing 5 out of our 9 divisions. And I've been with the department actually almost 5 years now. And I just wanted to pop by at the beginning of this meeting to say hello to the committee. Carrie, let me know about this meeting. And I thought this will be a great opportunity just to meet you all since we hadn't interacted before. But again, Carrie is going to be telling a lot more about the department, so I won't, give away her speech. But again, just wanted to say hello and just to say that, our department is very happy to continue to partner with the implementation committee and looking at, how we can work together to make the Shady Grove area an even greater place now and into the future. So with that, I will end my brief remarks and I guess turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stern. I'm going to grab the virtual mic from you so I can introduce Carrie to everyone. Before I do that, I just want to put in the chat for everyone who's here. This is the sector plan website, which our colleagues at Montgomery Planning keep up to date. And so for those of you who are wondering what the plan is and who the committee is, you can read all the details on this site. So without any further ado, it's my distinct privilege to welcome our guest speaker this evening, Ms. Carrie Sanders, who since September 2017 has been the division chief for Mid-County Planning at Montgomery Planning of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. In this role, Ms. Sanders oversees a wide range of projects and plans, including development review and master planning, all to improve the quality of life in Montgomery County by conserving and enhancing the natural and the built environment. Prior to her appointment as division chief, Ms. Sanders served for 7 years in the city of Alexandria, most recently as the deputy director of transportation and transit for the city of Alexandria. There, she moved forward several major projects, including the Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station and the Potomac Yard Small Area Plan, as well as the operation and the expansion of Potomac Yard Metroway. Ms. Sanders began her career in Brussels, Belgium, a city very close to my heart, where I lived back in the early 1990s when I was in college doing a semester abroad. We were chatting about that before the meeting began. In Brussels, Ms. Sanders worked in economic development. She holds a bachelor's degree from Indiana University and a master's degree in urban planning from our own University of Maryland College Park. Ms. Sanders has presented at national and regional conferences on a variety of planning topics, and she is currently member of the Leadership Montgomery Core Program. Ms. Sanders lives here in Montgomery County with her family, and it's a distinct privilege, Ms. Sanders, to welcome you this evening to our community, albeit virtually, and I'm going to turn things over to you with appreciation of your time and your expertise and all that you can share this evening. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff, for the the warm welcome. I appreciate that, and the introduction. I do want this to be interactive, and have the folks on the call be able to ask me any questions that they may have. But if I could share my screen and perhaps walk you through some slides, that would be great. So bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see.
So while you do that, Ms. Sanders, I will monitor the chat, and I can collect questions, and I'll moderate the Q&A following your talk. Do you prefer to take questions after? I assume you present. Is that okay?
That would be great. Yeah. If we could take questions after, that would be wonderful. And I will make sure that I can probably take a pause at key points in case there's anything that folks really, really want to chat about. But yeah, that would be great if I could give you an introduction. That would be wonderful. And Jeff, I guess maybe I would just want to start also by recognizing Ekosi Yearwood, who you had mentioned at the beginning, is our liaison to the Shady Grove Implementation Committee, and has really been an excellent liaison, not only for this committee, but also sort of throughout master planning all over Mid-County. So thank you, Ekosi, and he is also here to certainly help answer questions as we kind of go through the presentation. So with that, I know that the committee, and by the way, thank you all for serving in this role. It is so important for the county to have your expertise and your knowledge that you bring. And we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join the committee and provide your perspectives. So thank you. But I would like to just start a little bit about kind of stepping back about Montgomery Planning and who we are. I know the committee's obviously familiar with what we do, but we don't get a chance always to kind of talk about the bigger picture. So I thought it'd be helpful to talk a little bit about, what the planning department does, how we work on master plans, and how we review new developments. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail about our general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. And then I'll talk more specifically about plans in the Mid-County area, which is the area that I'm the chief of. So starting with Montgomery Planning and who we are. So we're part of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, which is essentially a state agency. And I realized that not every day you probably get to learn about the inner workings of government, but we are a commission with Prince George's County, and we have a joint commission that meets monthly to weigh in on decisions that affect both counties as it relates to land use and transportation. And we also have a specific, obviously, specific department in Wheaton, which handles all of Montgomery County's planning, but also the Parks Department as well. So we have a lot of responsibilities, and we are multidisciplinary as well. We have geographic areas that we work in. So today I'm talking to you mostly about the Mid-County area, which you see on the screen, but we also have geographic areas in the Up County and the Down County. And we handle research, special projects, we handle transportation planning, we handle all the new development applications for those areas. We also work closely with the community on master planning for each of those areas. So I went over this a bit, but we definitely are wide-reaching in the terms of types of plans that we do. We have an in-house think tank essentially in our organization that does cutting-edge research. We also oversee historic preservation, and we have a historic preservation commission. And we do updates to our zoning through our master plans, but we also consider zoning changes and provide advice to the planning board and to the county council about zoning changes that they may be looking at. So that kind of gives you hopefully a general overview of what we do. I would also like to talk a little bit about, Jeff had mentioned that it would be helpful for me to go over what a master plan really is and how master plans are implemented, and how Montgomery Planning is involved in that. So at a very basic level, the master plan is a vision for what the community would like to see in the future. And that vision is supported with recommendations to help implement it. And we spend a lot of time with the community, engaging with the community to ensure that the recommendations that come out of the plan are aligning with what the community wants to see in the future. And then, you know, as we do that, we also want to establish a dialogue and a relationship with each community so that we can be a resource for that community in the way that we are with Shady Grove, with Mr. Yearwood, who is a resource for you to not only answer questions about that master plan, but if new projects come into the community, we often have community members that want to understand better how that master plan affects or how that new development is aligning with the master plan. So we are here as a resource to provide that information. We're also obviously advising our board, which votes on the different developments that come in, as well as the master plans. But at the basic level, we're making sure that the vision of the community is shown in that master plan. And we are looking to educate and make sure everybody's aware of that vision and supporting that vision. I would also like to emphasize that supporting and prioritizing equity is a very big part of what we do. It's weaved into all of our work. And we actually have an equity and planning agenda that myself and Tanya, who's our acting planning director, who's on this call, worked with a number of folks to develop, that we are in the process of implementing at the department. We also, as a department, we serve as a guide for future development. So once again, when a development comes, we look at how that development aligns with the master plan, the zoning ordinance, the other laws that are in place, like the forest conservation law, and we advise our planning board, and we provide a recommendation on those developments and how they guide development. What master plans don't do is we don't have control over funding through a master plan. So we will make recommendations, for example, about projects that need to be funded, and we prioritize them, but we cannot actually fund them through the master plan. That is an important detail because I do think, you know, as much as the planning department would like to sort of provide that assurance to the community that it would be funded, we don't have that control through a plan per se. That process happens through what we call the capital improvement program at the county, or it happens through other processes that involve the government or private development. The other thing that we cannot ensure through a master plan is that redevelopment or reinvestment always occurs. We try to set up a process and set up a framework for the vision, but we are not having control over the actual, you know, development itself. That happens through the development process. The other thing I would mention is we often do have inquiries. Can we get a specific retail use in an area? And we can't dictate a specific retail use. We zone things in such a way that they're commercial. So we have the opportunity for folks to propose a certain commercial use, but we can't dictate what that retailer is. And we can't, you know, revoke existing approvals once something has been approved for development. One of the tricky things that we often run into is that we have many property owners, and while a master plan would envision those property owners coming together to consolidate land, we can't require that. And so that's something too that we often get questions about. And of course, we don't handle the operational side of implementation or code enforcement or crime. So those are some of the things that we don't do. And I do think it is helpful for folks to see both, because sometimes there are a lot of questions about that. In terms of the types of plans that we have a larger framework policy document called Thrive Montgomery 2050. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. And I did check with Mr. Yearwood to see if you had a recent presentation on it, because I didn't want to repeat something you might have already heard. But I did want to touch on that a bit today, because I think it's a really important framework for all the things that the planning department is doing, as well as the vision that I spoke of that we're implementing in the county. And this plan is our guiding policy document for all other plans. And so you can kind of see on this slide, we have, it is the largest circle. And then we have other plans that nest within that. So the functional plans and countywide initiatives. An example of that would be the countywide pedestrian plan that's currently underway. And then we have master and sector plans. So an example of that would actually be the Shady Grove sector plan from 2006, as well as the recent amendment that you had seen in 2021. And then we have the implementation side of those plans, which, as I said, we can't dictate that, but we review it and make sure that it complies with the master plan and with the applicable zoning laws and other laws that we have in place. And that is happening at the development review stage. And then lastly, we have what are studies and guidelines and standards. So we often will, study a particular area and check on the progress of the master plan. And we have done that a number of instances to see how can the master plan better advance. Are there technologies or changes in the area that need to be studied and affect the master plan? And we have a number of those initiatives also underway. I'm not going to go over this slide in great detail because I know it is detailed, but I think it is helpful to see the process from start to finish here. And you can see how the master plan begins when the council adds it to our work program, the county council and the planning board. That's the beginning of it. And then it goes through a number of steps. Each step along the way usually involves check-ins with our planning board. And then we get to the county council, a process where the county council reviews the document. And lastly, implementation. A couple of key points that I wanted to make clear is that we do have public hearings, both for the planning board as well as for the county council, that are really important steps in the process so that the public can weigh in on these plans. And those public hearings are both at the planning board, but also at the county council. And what informs the planning recommendations in these plans? So how do the plans actually, how do these recommendations come about? It's really a combination of community input, which you can see here in orange, the analysis of planners on the current conditions, the market forces, best practices that are in place, and then also outside expert consultation. So we will do like in-house research and analysis. We will look at transportation modeling, and all these things come together for our recommendations. So hopefully that gives the committee a sort of framework for thinking about how planning is approached. And I will tell you, having worked myself in 3 different local governments at this point, I started my work in this region in Rockville, actually, at the Rockville Planning Department, then moved to Alexandria, and then I'm here in at the Montgomery Planning Department. I can tell you that planning is such a community engagement based expertise and work. In order for planners to be effective in their work, it needs to be community based, and I think that is something that we're really working on, and I think furthering through our work, both in our sector plans, but also in our studies. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end in terms of some of the active things that we have going in the Mid-County. And I can give you maybe a snapshot of some of those activities that we have going on. Moving on from the framework more to what is the actual adopted Thrive Montgomery comprehensive plan for the county. You probably have heard much about Thrive, but it is just a really important document for us to establish a long-range vision for Montgomery County. We know that growth is going to happen in the county. We know that population is going to grow, and we want to plan for that. We last did this in 1969, so it's been a while since we've had this document updated. But we recently had the document completed and adopted over the last calendar year. And so now we're actually in the process of using the policies and the vision established in that document to help us move forward with some of our other work. Essentially, this document does not change the zoning in the county in any neighborhood, but what it does do is give us countywide policies, and it gives us a planning framework for us to do our more detailed work in communities. I thought it would be helpful for the committee to see this image, which I think was a really important element to the work that we have done with Thrive Montgomery 2050. We wanted, when we started this project, we wanted to make sure that we looked at where population clusters of growth were both happening, but also going to continue to further. And we really see the I-270 corridor as a major population growth center, as you can see from this image. And this obviously is impactful to the Shady Grove community because you can see a lot of this growth happening in this area that we're talking about tonight. But also we're looking at the fact that our transit corridors are also aligning with a lot of what we're going to see this growth happen and continue to happen. What you also notice from this is that we aren't anticipating growth in our agricultural areas or our rural areas, and that is purposeful because those are our environmentally sensitive areas where we don't want to see growth. We want the growth to happen near transit and near the infrastructure that's in place. So this image, I'm trying to advance my slide, pardon me, and there we go. This image next shows you the environmental constraints that I spoke of. We have this constrained area, which is, roughly 81% of the land area. And so we really have to work, pardon me, we really have to work within the areas that can be developed that are not environmentally sensitive. And so that is what is driving our focus on development at transit. And this is not a new concept. Obviously, the Shady Grove community is very familiar. This is such an integral part of the Shady Grove sector plan. But you can see that this is something that we have been successful as a county, won a number of awards for our smart growth initiatives, particularly here at the White Flint area, now called North Bethesda. And this image shows you the before and after of this area, which continues to experience infill development and really was at one point a parking lot with literally one tree. So on the left, you can see the parking lot that was once there. On the right, you can see the development that has come about, and more development continues in this area as the master plan advances. This is, a really important part of the sort of three main goals of Thrive, this image that I showed you before, because what we want to make sure we do is develop by transit, but we also want to make sure that that development is compact. And that feeds into sort of the next three things I wanted to cover, which are really important elements of Thrive Montgomery 2050. and really define the plan and kind of define the vision that we see as so important moving forward. We really see that economic competitiveness is essential. We need to keep ourselves as a county competitive with our, industries and making sure that our economic performance is strong. And we actually feel that in order to do that, we need to continue to create great places that are transit oriented, like I showed on the previous slide in North Bethesda. And this also needs to happen in Shady Grove. And we feel strongly that this is something that the county must continue to focus on and be very deliberate about. And this requires, emphasis on quality of place, amenities, infrastructure, and housing. It's going to be important that we get the housing balance with jobs right. And I think that's another piece of economic competitiveness that we are focused on as well. Racial equity and social justice is another major component of Thrive Montgomery 2050. And we feel that we need to seek to address the historical inequities in Montgomery County. You can see from this slide that population by race and you can see the change from 1960 to 2020 it's an extremely diverse county, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to address these inequities through all of our work. So that's another very important part of Thrive. And third, I will end with environmental health and resilience. Once again, corridor focused growth, compact development, development that is focused on our corridors and not outside of our corridors is a major component of Thrive. And we feel that all of this works together to improve resiliency. So I'm going to now drill down a bit into the Montgomery County Mid-County Division. And you can see here from this slide what that area encompasses in terms of the jurisdictions of Rockville, Gaithersburg, but also all of the other neighborhoods and planned communities that are shown on this screen. So I'm going to probably spend 5 more minutes or so before I take questions to go over with you some of the activities that are happening in our division and to let you know the breadth of our work and hopefully give a better picture of how this work is working to implement the vision of Thrive. So essentially our division reviews a lot of new development. We have had 2.7 million square feet of total development reviewed, and that was in the last fiscal year. And that includes commercial uses that are shown here, over 600,000 square feet of commercial uses and over 2,300 residential dwelling units. A portion of those which are moderately priced dwelling units, which are required through our existing zoning ordinance. And I would let you know that, what we see in the Mid-County Division in terms of development is a lot of redevelopment of metro station areas. So for example, the Strathmore Square development is a major redevelopment of the metro station at Grosvenor Strathmore. We also have new projects in Wheaton, and we are seeing more projects in White Oak, which is a master plan that was adopted in 2014. So we are seeing parts of the county that traditionally had not had development. Those projects are now happening. And we are encouraged that we are seeing more life sciences development in the county, which is a major job growth center for the county. A couple of the areas that we are focused on right now in the Mid-County where we have active projects, the first is in Wheaton. We have a study that we recently completed and that we are essentially looking to present to our county council in the coming months. And we have transmitted it to them. And this study is an example of what I talked about earlier, where we are checking back in with the 2012 master plan, and we are looking at how that master plan in Wheaton is advancing. We also are engaging with the property owners, and we're engaging with different stakeholders in the community to understand maybe what some of the hurdles have been in getting that master plan implemented. And then lastly, we've developed strategies to incentivize some public and private investment in that area. And we've identified some priorities for how it could be revitalized. We presented these recommendations to our planning board in February, and then we transmitted it recently to the county council. So that's an example of a recent study that we have worked on. We also have 2 other master plans currently underway. One is for the Great Seneca area, which I know is close to Shady Grove, so you are probably very familiar with this area. We initiated this master plan last spring, and we are in the process of developing recommendations to present to our board in the coming months. What we're looking at with this is how to essentially examine the area and work with the community to identify strengths and needs in order to create a vision for the future. We have seen the area grow in terms of life sciences, but what we have not seen is some of the placemaking and community building and identity that the plan envisioned not move forward. And so what we've heard from the community is how do we essentially establish a sense of place in this area? How do we link these disconnected job centers to be more of a connected job center? And lastly, how do we provide more affordable housing in this area? So those are some of the things we've heard thus far, and we're working to develop recommendations with the community that we can present for the plan in the coming months. And the third initiative that I wanted to mention that we are working on currently is the University Boulevard Corridor Plan. Mr. Yearwood, who's on the call, is our lead planner on this project. It's a very important corridor project that links Wheaton and essentially the Four Corners area, and looks at not only the roadway safety along University Boulevard, but also how there may be potential for new infill development along the corridor, and how we plan for bus rapid transit, which is planned for this corridor, but we haven't yet gone into a design of that. So we are in the earlier stages of this plan. We're having a lot of meetings, a lot of community engagement. Nkosi has done a great job. We probably have, it feels we have just activities every day on this plan. And I think we're doing a good job of making sure that we're reaching out and getting engagement with the community. So I just wanted to provide the committee with just a list of some of the recent projects that we have had, and the 2 that are current projects underway at the bottom here. But you can see we've kept busy with a lot of master plan work, and we are very eager to sort of continue to engage and see these master plans move ahead into the future. So that actually concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions from the committee. And I understand from Jeff that there may be questions specifically about Shady Grove too, so I'm happy to go into that. I have some additional slides if that's helpful that talks specifically about Shady Grove, but I didn't want to necessarily go into that without hearing from the committee first and maybe some of the questions you may have. So thank you.
Ms. Sanders, thank you very much. That was really helpful. So in the chat, several folks who are with us this evening have put questions. I will confess, as is obvious, I've put my own questions, but I'm not privileging those. I'm going to take the questions in the order that they are received. I've also put some opinions, to be quite honest, and all are welcome to equally share opinions and thoughts. So in order of our guests this evening, and thank you again for the presentation, I'm going to read the question from Adam Louie. What are the current milestones for this year, and have they pivoted based on recent political and economic climates? A really good question.
Thank you. That is a good question. So I can speak specifically about the Mid-County Division, if that's helpful.
Sure.
But I could also maybe elaborate a little bit on Thrive Montgomery 2050, because that is probably one of the most key milestones over the last fiscal year. We have been working at that plan for quite some time. So we were very, very pleased when the county council adopted the plan last fall, and then allowed us to kind of move into more of the implementation stages of that plan. So I would say that is one of the largest milestones that we have crossed. And I'm also looking at the second part of the question: how have they pivoted based on recent political and economic climates? Well, I mean, I do think one of the ways that we have been really called by our county council members and also by the community is to really look more closely at housing and how we can provide more affordable housing in Montgomery County, and how our master plans can support that, and our other laws and zoning tools we have in place. And I do think that is, a very hot topic in terms of what the community is concerned about, and frankly, what the region is concerned about. We feel we are racing to provide the housing that folks need. And we're trying everything we can to make sure that we have the tools in place so that as the population grows and simply as the housing needs increase, we're ready. So I think that is something that from a recent political and economic climate situation is very key for us.
Thank you. Let's get back to the topic of population in a moment with the next question. But in the order that I've seen them, questions. Shobana Sharma, member of our committee, by the way, asks, how do we move the Shady Grove sector plan forward? Any recommendations?
I think that's a great question. And I was actually talking to Kosi before this meeting in the office this afternoon, because I think, obviously this is something we want to see too. And we are equally frustrated that, we have an adopted preliminary plan of where the bus depot is currently located. And that preliminary plan is not able to move forward until that bus depot for MCPS moves. So we understand the frustration. We also understand that the county council is focused on this. We know that the Department of General Services is also focused on this. So I know that the committee has been working really hard to raise the visibility of this, which I think is needed. And I do appreciate that. How we move it forward, there's just really not an easy answer, but I do think it needs to happen. And I understand the concern about the timing. So I don't know that I have an easy answer for you. We don't have, as I mentioned, through our master plans, we don't have an implementation directive. Well, we have a recommendation, but we can't actually do it ourselves as the planning department. So we do need all the other partners to come together and move ahead. And I know that there's been a lot of effort. I was really encouraged to hear that Mr. Dice is coming to the June meeting of the committee. I think it would be helpful. Yeah, I would think it would be helpful to have a dialogue about what is the timeframe, and could there be some specific timing that's added to some of the planning, and could there be some milestones that could be put out there, and maybe that's a nice dialogue to have with Mr. Dice when he's here in June. And I'm happy to join that meeting as well, if that's helpful.
That'd be great. And for you and others, that meeting will be on June 7th at 7:30, also via Teams. And Ms. Sanders, to your point about dialogue and community engagement, for the public record, we've been asking Mr. Elrich and his team for such a briefing and dialogue since September of 2022. We've asked probably 24 times, and only recently did we hear from Ms. Spielberg that Mr. Dice will be joining us in June. So our community has been open, communicative, fully willing to have a dialogue with DGS. And I know this isn't your issue, but just for the public record, we're happy to talk and meet and dialogue and all around the contours of what you're describing. The onus is on the executive leadership to meet us where we obviously stand in terms of communication. Let's get back to the bus depot in a minute, but what I'd like to share is a question that I have. I'm going to take us off script here for a second. So you had said that planning has an interdisciplinary staff and a research arm, and you conduct planning research. Why are the resources of planning not being brought to bear on figuring out this obvious persistent problem that's inhibiting the completion of the Shady Grove Plan? And conversely, you can't answer this question, but why are we learning from the executive branch that high school students are being brought in to try to noodle and figure this problem out when we hear from planning that it has a research arm with talented expert planners like yourself and Mr. Yearwood to bring this expertise to bear on problems involving development? So can you answer that question or enlighten me to understand why those resources aren't being harnessed to solve this problem? Thanks.
Well, I guess to your point about the research that we're doing, I think we look at information and we conduct research about trends that are happening. We don't necessarily do the exact same work, I think, that you're describing that the Department of General Services does. That does not mean that we can't provide information to the Department of General Services if they have requests for, let's say, information that we can gather for them. We would be happy to do that. But we don't necessarily have an in-house. I think what you're speaking of is almost like an in-house site assessment team. We do conduct more like research-based activities, not so much site assessment activities, which I think that this activity that you're speaking of with finding a new location for the depot is pretty site specific and does involve some detailed engineering work. But if there are things that we can do to provide information to the Department of General Services, we are happy to do that, and we are happy to be a resource however we can be helpful.
Great, thank you, much appreciated.
Yeah. No problem.
Thank you. So our next question from Carol Kosary, also a member of our committee. You stated that we are anticipating that the county's population will increase. The latest census data, however, indicates that the county's population has actually decreased in the last several years. What if your population projections concerning increased growth are incorrect?
So I think that's a good question. We have seen what you're describing as well over the last few years. So I think our projections are looking out a bit further, like you're essentially taking the trends of many, many years and projecting them out. But yes, there has been a slight dip recently, and I know, we do expect, however, that we're going to see continued growth, and we are going to see continued demand for housing. And so I think that is something that hasn't changed over the last few years. And some of that has to do with market forces, and some of that has to do with general supply, but we are definitely needing to provide more housing. And so that is something that we are contending with daily, and we want to make sure that residents have options. I think that is definitely something that Traditionally, Montgomery County has had a lot of different housing options, and we want to make sure that that continues. Um, and that is also choices in terms of not only housing, but also transportation choices and other quality of life choices that are so integral to the vision that Thrive Montgomery 2050 works on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
So our next question, and then after we go through the questions in the chat, we can open it up verbally for people to raise their hands. Pemin Habibi, one of our guests this evening, asks, question, many of us bought our properties based on the master plan you approved for the west side at Shady Grove. However, we have not seen any progress with relocating the bus depot, and from what I have read online, you are not planning on moving the project forward anytime soon. What should we as a community do to get your attention? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know this is a very challenging issue, and we, as I spoke before, I hear it and I understand the frustration. We do have an approved preliminary plan for the area where the Montgomery County Public School bus depot is located. That preliminary plan was approved by our board in 2012. So the planning department fully supports the movement of the bus depot out of this area and the implementation of the preliminary plan. Our board already approved the preliminary plan. I think the issue is that and I know many of you are familiar with the details, but we need to find a new home for the bus depot. And when I say we, it isn't necessarily something that the planning department can control or oversee. The Department of General Services will be doing that. And I know they're coming to your next meeting to talk more about that and their progress. But we will support if they need information. We are here as a support for them. And as I said before, we'll continue to keep the committee up to speed on any information we have about this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. I'm going to interject here. Over the many years that I myself have educated myself about this particular issue, there has been, I would categorize this as finger pointing for years. DGS, you're absolutely right about DGS. Okay. At the same time, when we speak with DGS, we hear, oh, MCPS needs to do X, Y, and Z. Okay. And then we often hear, well, the council needs to do this, or, oh, no, a county executive needs to do this. We're done. I'm going to speak holistically. We are done with such finger pointing in this community. Okay, that's not directed at you. I just want to make a public statement about that because it is ridiculous, embarrassing, not for us. It's not embarrassing for us. It's embarrassing for this county for such finger pointing to go on and for such investment of resources in this plan to have it be languishing year after year after year is just obscene. It's obscene. Thank you. The next question comes from Benny Garcia, a resident of Westside. Benny, great to see you as always. Does future planning take into account future school populations? Additional schools was one of the selling points of the future growth on the east side of the Shady Grove plan and the west side of Shady Grove. Can you speak to the subject of future school populations? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Benny, we do project future school population based on the amount of zoning density that a certain site has. For example, if a site allows a certain amount of residential density, that would be where we would project out students for that site. So we went through that exercise in 2006 when we did the sector plan in Shady Grove, but also when we did the update. If we made any zoning changes with that update, we looked at how that may affect any school needs. So that is an integral part of the process.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're 8:20. Ms. Sanders, can you stay with us for another 10 or 15 minutes for a few more questions?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
Great, thank you. Marianne Shervin. Marianne, thank you for your question. I'm going to ask it. Where can we find a detailed list of sites, quote, looked at and didn't work, end quote, so we know what sites to focus on. Has anyone looked at the very industrial area near the air park in the vicinity of the Sandy Spring Bank area? What criteria is the county using to look at sites? Please also tell me who decided to give this problem to high school students and who was their mentor. So I'm going to kind of insert myself here. So Marianne, excellent questions. Ms. Sanders can answer to the degree that she wishes and can. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the bulk of this is really a question to be asked to Mr. Dice when he joins us in June. I'm not trying to kick the can down the road, but I'll just point that out because when these questions have come up before in our meeting with Council Member Lutke back in February, it was really rightly deferring to the executives because they're the ones who are leading this. But Ms. Sanders, do you want to speak to this in any way? Maybe you can answer it, and I can't. So
I don't have. I do think Mr. Dice is the best person to answer it because that, and I don't want to leave the committee feeling that I'm passing it on to another government agency. That's not my intent. But our Department of General Services, that's overseen by Mr. Dice, they have an arm of their sort of site analysis team that actually looks at individual sites from a real estate perspective, and looks at all these details. And so they should be able to answer some of these more detailed questions. When the planning department takes a project to the planning board for approval, that's when we have the opportunity, for example, to provide recommendations to the Department of General Services about a project. For example, if Department of General Services is implementing a library, which they have done in Wheaton, they would, bring that as a mandatory referral to our planning board, or any kind of, new government facility. When they do that, we provide recommendations to our board about the site and all the ways that it complies with the master plan or any concerns that we have. And that's when we get to weigh in and provide our expertise. But we also are here as a resource, as I mentioned before. If our research team can provide any information to them, we are happy to do that. But our involvement comes when the projects come to our board. Hopefully that provides some answer. I do think Mr. Dice will be able to answer that question when he comes in June.
I think so too. Okay, if anyone else has a question they wish to ask verbally, just raise your hand. And until I see a hand, I'll continue to ask the questions in the chat. Andrew asks, I do not believe a bus depot would be a proper use of eminent domain. The land adjacent to Sandy Spring Bank is owned by one of my friends, and he has not an interest in a bus depot on his property. Andrew, noted. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, please raise your hand if you wish to ask a question, and I'll call on you if anyone wishes to. Carol, thank you. And the rec center identified in the Department of Recreation Vision 2030 is also noted in the Shady Grove sector plan. Right, Carol, absolutely. Marianne, thank you. I was not talking eminent domain, but thank you for clarifying. Yes. Okay, seeing no hands or questions, I'd like to ask one, Ms. Sanders. So over the course of several years following Montgomery Planning social media, I've seen mention of placemaking. I've seen mention of engagement of Better Block, nonprofit organization. Usually that emanates from a community group wanting to engage Better Block. But from my own vantage point, I hear about placemaking. I have friends who are planners. I get what that means. One of the struggles that we see in the Shady Grove sector is not a lot of placemaking going on, or an opportunity to voice opinions about placemaking. Instead, what we have is extremely ad hoc conversation and constant need to follow up with county offices about issues of core issues such as traffic safety, the issue of the bus depot, that we don't see a lot of things happening. So as we hear about placemaking happening in other sectors, which is fantastic for those sectors, we're left to wonder, does our place matter, frankly? Because we're not being asked about placemaking. Now, understandably, placemaking thinking was going on when the plan was conceptualized 25 years ago. I get that. But how can we square placemaking going on in other parts of the county when there's obviously no placemaking going on in this sector? Help me understand that.
Sorry for the delay. I was
Well,
trying to unmute myself. Apologies.
no.
Yeah. So I think this is a good question. And for those that may be less familiar with placemaking, it's essentially it's a tool that's used in urban planning to reimagine or reinvent a public space. So the idea is to kind of strengthen the connection between the community and the places they share, and also it provides an opportunity for the community to actually imagine and create something in a place, and often that's done in a temporary way. So for example, we had a recent master plan initiative happening in Burtonsville, and we did an event where we worked with the community to envision what could be in one of their community centers and what that could look like. And that process in itself is placemaking. Another example may be perhaps more concrete, where we would work with the community to install a new mural that activates a public space and helps to incrementally create a space there that was envisioned through a master plan. We've done that in other parts of the county, including in Wheaton most recently. We feel that placemaking is something that has to be community-based and community-inspired. So if the Shady Grove community is interested in placemaking, that would be something that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, and would be really interested in hearing your ideas for that. I think what we have often found is placemaking is most successful when there's a core group of community members that are interested and wanting to work on a project together. And that's something that I think we'd love to hear more from Shady Grove, if that's something of interest to you all.
Thank you. Before I call on the gentleman who just raised his hand, we have murals at the Bethesda Metro, and we have murals in Wheaton, notably near your headquarters. Okay. And when I brought up having a mural at the Shady Grove Metro to Evan Glass, I was pointed to exactly the resource you suggested, where the community needs to mobilize and recommend something. So, it's evident to me that placemaking either occurs where there's political influence or where there's money. I'll just put it out there. So maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a great desire for placemaking in our community, because we're, like any other community. But how to go about doing that? Is it a matter of getting people in a room together to talk about it? Is it a matter of bringing it up in these meetings? Is it a matter of writing to our council member? How does one do that? I mean, that we don't have time for these answers to these questions, but as I'm all about placemaking, but it seems to be happening everywhere except here. Okay, so let me turn to Alfred Minichello. Alfred, go ahead with your question.
Good evening. I hope my voice is working. My video doesn't seem to be working, but thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Sanders, and for all of this information and for your time. I was encouraged during one of the slides on your presentation about hearing the Great Seneca community building. There was a reference to something about that, where something that was anticipated wasn't developing as fast or wasn't developing the way it was envisioned. And that gave me encouragement to hear that there was some facility or some mechanism to build community, at least in relation to what you mentioned with Great Seneca's plan. Could we take some best practices from these other sector plans and implement them in the local Shady Grove area? I'm very selfish because I have a granddaughter who goes with her friend to Starbucks there at the Crabs Branch and Gramercy corner. But I'm scared for my life because of the logistics of getting her there on her bicycle or walking. We've gotten some improvement on those safety concerns, but I feel like I'm not the only one who's hungry for community. We joke about having a deli which sells dill pickles and great resources of all kinds. And I know we can't determine what retail comes to a place, but I feel like there's a lot more vision and engagement around community building that could be provided. And I ask that as an open-ended, and I certainly don't mean to point at you. We're reaching for help in any way we can.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Alfred. That I really appreciate that question. And I see also the question, Jeff, in the chat about tactical urbanism.
Right.
So the placemaking initiative that the department has is fairly new, and that's why I didn't go over it greatly in my presentation. It's something that we started just a few years ago. And we are open to, tactical urbanism through placemaking. We're open to providing sort of mini grants to the community for murals and things like that. But we are sort of in the process at this time of developing like a strategic plan for placemaking and how we conduct it as a department, because we did 1 or 2 events and now everybody's excited about it. So we're organizing ourselves to kind of have a more structured process around it. So far, we have had most recently, all of the most recent events we've had have been mainly tied to areas where we've had master plan updates. Like, to give you an example, we had a master plan underway in Farrell and Briggs Cheney, and so we did a placemaking event associated with that master plan. We had a placemaking event in the Pike District because we had a study going on in there. But we also understand that there are other areas such as Shady Grove that don't have an active master plan or don't have an active study, but are still interested in placemaking. And so what I would say is, Jeff, if you don't mind following up with me on sort of
Sure.
maybe a point of contact from the committee that I could, maybe learn more about the committee's interest in placemaking and if there are certain ideas that are of interest to the committee. So I can I've already noted that there is a big interest, and I can see in the chat folks are putting examples of public art. So I think this is helpful for me as we start to put together this plan, this strategic plan for placemaking, to know that Shady Grove is of interest. We also have Wheaton that has expressed a lot of interest as well in Mid-County, and also White Oak. So we have a lot of interests. But I think it's good for me to know this now as we come with this strategic plan of how to approach it.
Yeah, that's great, and I'll follow up with you definitely. Thank you for taking the questions and the tough questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think to the point that have been made here, much energy obviously has been put into the bus depot issue, and we all know what that is, and we've been beating that horse to death. And I think good energy from the community, which would not necessarily, because the bus depots become the black hole problem that it is, with finger pointing and languishing leadership, it's sucked up all energy that would otherwise be put towards placemaking or creative thinking, and that's the problem. That doesn't mean placemaking and good thinking about placemaking shouldn't go forward, but until this bus depot issue gets resolved, and not along a decade-long timeline, we're going to continue to speak out about that and do the very best in terms of communication and advocacy so that the Shady Grove plan gets done, because it needs to. Bus depot and all, including placemaking that hasn't happened yet. I saw Joe Perella's hand. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'd like to put something on the table here for placemaking. I came to the area back in 1996, and you have and I live in Old Durwood. This is the namesake of Durwood, and most of us live in the area of Durwood that are in this group. And in the master plan, there were 5 different buildings that were designated or were looked at to actually be historically preserved. But what's happening now is that nothing's really being done. Don't really care, I guess, from other people, from the higher ups. One structure was actually taken down. It was the old Durwood store. I mean, we're talking about buildings that were built in the 1880s. So where placemaking technically is what Durwood is. It's the place itself. You also have Crabb's Branch. That's actually Jeremiah Crabb. He lived during the Revolutionary War. That's the namesake. If you go right in front of, I think it's Lexus, there is a huge sign there from Montgomery County showing who he is and what he did. Incredible person, for one thing. Also, you have in the area, you had a skirmish here during the Civil War. Ricketts Run, it was called. So placemaking, there's a lot of historical things can be gathered throughout this, instead of having something lost. Because what's happening is we're losing our identity. 20855 is Durwood, and we're losing the identity. So I'm just saying, placemaking would be a great idea, and then actually an opportunity to bring back that history that's in this area. Over.
Thank you, Joe. Ms. Sanders, any thoughts? And if not, we'll go to a couple more questions and then we'll call.
I appreciate. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your comments. And I do. It sounds like I'm hearing from the committee there is definitely an interest in placemaking. So that's helpful for me to as a takeaway from this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, because I actually went to the historical group. I said, how much is it just to place a sign of what a building was at one time on that property or near the property or on the street? So if somebody was interested, they could see what it looked like or what have you, because we're losing all these buildings. The wealth of the area, people are like buying up these houses and land and demoing them and putting a McMansion on them or what have you. So there is an old Durwood school. Right now it's right near where you have the McDonald's, right behind McDonald's. That old Durwood school. It's like one of the old-fashioned schools, one room. You have the Railman's building that was historically, I guess in a way, I'm not sure what the status is right now. Nikosi, what is the status of the Railman's building, the old Durwood Market?
Are you talking about a Durwood store and post office?
Yeah.
We've over the last, decade or more, we've had multiple meetings with that property owner. And the last thing, within the last 6 months, A lot is on his plate to come back in with a preliminary plan or a concept plan for that property. They're looking to retain a portion of it and add, I think, up to 6 or 8 units on the site. But we haven't seen anything from him in a number of months.
Well, the past 9 months, there's been somebody just squatting there, having a trailer. You had trucks there on that property. I mean, of course, it's historically designated, but you have shenanigans that are going on to the property that could damage the property. So that's what I'm saying. It's like there's no policing of the other properties. And also at one time, to give you a little historical tidbit here also, there used to be a Durwood rail stop for the train that burned back in the 50s. But that was a la the style of the train station in Gaithersburg. It was a Victorian style. And even that, there is a photograph that's out there. Even having that as a mural somewhere. I mean, just to show what's going on, a sense of place. There's nothing. It's been erased. And for each year that passes by, people will forget. They have no idea what's going on here in 20855 Durwood.
Joe, thank you. And speaking as a historian myself, I appreciate and value what you're saying. So thank you. Ms. Sanders, I want to respect your time this evening. Can we take one more question? Okay. Carol, you're next.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave the night without letting Ms. Sanders know how much we really appreciate Nicosi.
Certainly. Yes, indeed. Agreed. Nicosi is our lifeline to Montgomery planning. And Nicosi, thank you as always. And Ms. Sanders, please know that.
Thank you, Carol. Yes, we very appreciate all of his work, both in Shady Grove, but also in lots of other parts of Mid-County. So he's really doing a great job.
Carol, the check is in the mail.
Very good. Marianne?
I was going to say no other part of the county can have him. He's all ours.
He's sending you another check now, Carol. See how that works. Marianne, you have a question?
I do. I was going to type it in, but it was getting too long. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. So I've been active, not as active as some people, in civic things for a long time. We definitely fought against the ICC, and at least my worst fears came true. It's a speedway, and all the trees lost and everything else, and the quote, environmental mitigation of the ICC was planting about 1,000 twigs that washed away the first time it rained. I live between Redland Road and Shady Grove Road, and can't keep my windows open anymore and I can't even imagine what it's like for people closer to that. So we're called on to call 311, and we're called on to write letters and go to meetings and all these things. And I do feel that we're back in the era where we had the t-shirts printed that said, "Don't dump on Durwood." We've got emission stations. We've got the dump, literally. We've got the metro station, the maintenance yard, that bus depot thing near Crabs Branch, the school bus depot. There's a lot of crap in Durwood, and I think the citizens have really tried to make things better. And I feel like it's time for the elected officials and some of the county employees to step up and it shouldn't be up to us to call 311 all the time because there's trash everywhere when we're on the route to the dump. So that should be something that just happened when the dump was put there and the roads were widened and everything. So I guess I'm just tired and frustrated because I feel like we're being asked to do a lot of the work when we're certainly paying taxes. And I do agree, Nicosia, we've known you for years and you've shown up and done a lot of good. But I just think that we should expect more from our government, including things like solving the bus depot relocation problem. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne. I appreciate the feedback, and I appreciate you going over your concerns.
Thank you. Okay, so Ms. Sanders, thank you for your time this evening. You're welcome. We can continue if you want to, but I do want to respect your evening. We're at 8:45. I want to kind of wrap up the meeting by 9 o'clock, which is what we usually try to do, but we can go longer if you want to take another couple of questions. That's up to you, respectfully.
I'm happy to take a couple more questions. That's no problem.
Okay, all right, thank you. With that, Shobana, you're next. Please go ahead. I see your hand.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Ms. Sanders. It was very informative, your presentation. And I also wanted to quickly compliment Nkosi. I must have sent him 20 emails today requesting him to send links to people, and he always does it with a smile. So thank you both. My question relates to the parcel of land in the west side at Crabs Branch and Shady Grove. It's that parcel which is, I guess the fate of that parcel is undecided. Do you have any updates as to what is happening with that land, or, you know, what vision does the county see for that parcel? Because we don't, from what we've heard, we don't see retail going there. So what can go there? And, you know, second to that, as a community member of the West Side, you know, we are strongly advocating to have that as green space. We have no green space in this community. And with the East Side not being developed for another decade or so, we need something. So that is where our community is coming from. And so if you could speak to that, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Maybe I can pull up a map so that others can see the area that you're speaking of. So bear with me just for a moment as I do that.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I was muted. Hopefully this slide here shows the area that you're speaking of, Shabina. Is it essentially, I don't think my mouse is showing up, but is it this area that you're speaking of here?
Yes, that is correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have any active development applications for that area. However, we know that the developer is planning to implement the preliminary plan approval for that area. I will also ask Nkosi if he has anything to add. He might have spoken more recently with the applicant about it. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Nkosi?
No, not since the last time I did the committee on this. Is that the land is still owned by Montgomery County. Do have a preliminary plan approval that had contemplated office at that location. That's not going to happen. The main lead developer, UYA, for a couple of years have looked at an alternative use at that location, primarily commercial use. So yes, I know they were exploring alternatives, but we have not met with them recently on that particular portion of the site. So I really don't have any new information to share on it.
So follow up, thank you for that. How would we as a community go about trying to, could we become an applicant to request that or develop that as green space? How would that work? Is that possible even?
Well, it has, that's a good question. It actually does have, as Nkosi says, a preliminary plan approval on it, on the property. So what we need now is the step that follows that, which is the site plan. I will also, before I go into the answering that specific question, I will add to what Nkosi said, which is that the developer is coming, the applicant is coming to the planning board in a few weeks to do an amendment of that area. It's not a amendment of great significance, but in the discussions regarding that amendment, I understood from the applicant that they are going to continue to move ahead with the area that we just looked at. They don't, even if they haven't submitted something yet, I do understand that they are focused on implementing the preliminary plan in that area. And I do understand as well that from our recent conversation, that the use of it was not changing either. I know it was originally contemplated for a grocery store, and I do believe that they're still looking at a commercial use for that location. That's the most recent information I have. It's been a few months, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more information.
That's good to hear, because we had heard that they were possibly looking at putting more townhomes there. So that was something that in talking with several developer representatives that I had heard personally. So it's good to hear that.
I have not seen that proposal. That hasn't come before me. I suppose anything is, things could change, but I haven't seen that proposal for townhomes there.
Okay. All right. So if they do come, I mean, the process when they come and request a change to a preliminary approval, how does that work for those of us that don't understand or don't know how that works?
Sure thing. So if they want to change what they've already gotten approved there, they will have to amend their preliminary plan, which if they amend a preliminary plan, that goes to the planning board, and there's a report that's associated with that that's produced by the staff. All of that is online and available for the committee to see. The plans themselves are actually also online, which is a really nice resource. Most communities don't have that resource. All of our plans are online. So if anybody wants to come, look at them, I know that they can be a bit detailed, but you can find information there. You can look into what's approved and so on. It's all online. And if it's helpful, I can put that in the chat, the link to that particular resource for the committee.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for your input and your answers here. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shobana. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Ms. Sanders, would you be willing to share your PowerPoint so it could be included under our April 12th meeting materials on the Shady Grove Sector Plan website? Would that be okay?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure Nkosi has a copy of that so he can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Our next, Aaron Kraut from Councilmember Lutke's office. Aaron, please go ahead. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Aaron Kraut, Chief of Staff for County Council Member Lutke. Just wanted to say again that if there are any things that are happening right now in the area that we can possibly help with county government, let me know. For instance, Joe mentioned a historic property or a property of some historic significance where he was concerned about squatting or trailers. If doesn't have to be off the top of your head, but if you or someone could get me that address, we would then go to the County Department of Housing and Community Affairs and ask them to take a look, because there are certain codes that you have to meet. So for things like that, that's really why I'm here, in addition to providing any updates on our status with the Bus Depot CIP project. But please feel free to reach out, and I'll leave my email in the chat for everyone.
Aaron, thank you, as always. Much appreciated. Thank you. Shobana mentions in the chat there's an uptick in crime. Shobana, do you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. We have folks walking around the neighborhood in the middle of the night, stealing Amazon packages. We've had them at our front doorstep, just hanging right at our front door.
This is West Side?
Yes, we don't know what they're doing. Also, last night there was a car that was broken into. This has happened from time to time, but last night seemed to be a pretty busy night over here. So people are very worried. You know, we all have cameras. We captured an individual on the camera going in various parts of the neighborhood. So, I mean, we are looking at, and hopefully we'll have some type of neighborhood watch. But we wanted to know, you know, what other avenues are available to us as far as county resources, maybe.
Yeah, so first thing is we'll reach out to the district commander for this district, police district commander, figure out what they're seeing, making sure, like, you know, if people do have video footage, sometimes whatever happens, that doesn't get communicated to the right officer, and we can help ensure that happens. I mean, I think we'll reach out, get some more tips. That we do have things like mobile security cameras. You may have seen some in various parking lots where it's a camera, you can move it, but it goes very high, maybe like 40, 50 feet, and they tend to help dissuade some property theft crime, at least for some time, because there's a big camera there with basically a light on it. So there are things like that, but I think the first step is we'll reach out to the district commander, and I'll follow up with you about what they think. So
thanks. I mean, even if they could show some presence, patrol every once in a while, you know.
Yep, that's always something that can happen. So
that would be good. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shobana. Thank you, Aaron. Yes, indeed. Okay. Our last question for this evening will be Joe Perillo. Joe, back to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, question, and this is not even pertaining to Durwood now. It's pertaining to the master plan. The way back about 20 years ago, I'm going back with my memory. There was supposed to be a library in the master plan on the west side, near the roundabout there. Nicosia, was that eliminated in 2006, or is that still on the table?
They're still on the table.
I haven't seen anything. What's the status on something like that?
Well, the preliminary plan was approved, essentially allowed a phasing of the potential implementation of a library at that location. It will be within one of the multifamily buildings as part of the west side, likely the last multifamily building to be built. Yeah, so it's really, you know, the preliminary plan calls for it. Obviously, we will see in terms of implementation, where is the position of Montgomery County libraries, as well as development general services regarding the implementation of it.
Can I jump in that, and not really at the risk of getting over my skis here, but so the building it would be in needs to be built, and then we're going to need to make sure the library is actually funded in the county capital budget by a certain date, I think, after the building is built or approved. I forget which one, to make sure that library happens. So I don't think that, in other words, the clock hasn't started yet, right, Nkosi? But once
it hasn't started. There's a trigger regarding the completion, I believe, of building B. I have to go back and look at the old site plan. But in terms of the second multifamily building, regarding the delivery of starting essentially the clock on the new library, which will be a more of a smaller scale, not standalone. It will be integrated within essentially ground floor facility.
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, the council members were very aware of this, and we need to be on the same page. So when that happens, we're ready to go to make sure we're doing everything we can to make sure that's in the county library's capital budget. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Okay. Joe, you didn't get a chance to ask your last question. You're our last speaker for this evening. Go ahead.
That was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you? Okay. I'm sorry. You asked the question about the library. Sorry. It's getting late for me.
That's right.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Apologies. Ms. Sanders, thank you very, very much for your time this evening. Great presentation. Thank you for answering the questions, and especially the challenging ones. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for allowing us to learn from you this evening and engage with you in the ways that we have. And it was very, very helpful. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me, and I really appreciate once again that the committee takes the time and fulfills this important role. So we do appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be sending you a proper thank you note and look forward to keeping in touch. And again, from me to Nkosi, thank you, Nkosi, and on behalf of the entire committee, Nkosi, thank you for the work that you do. We'll take just another couple of minutes to. You're very welcome. We'll wrap things up. Nkosi, are there any particular updates that you want to share beyond what we've learned from you this evening?
There's that ongoing bike project that Montgomery County DOT will have a meeting on, I believe, tomorrow evening. There's something on Crabs Branch that may get a little bit more daylight. I don't have a lot of information publicly yet to share on that, but that's going to be coming. We'll see if that germinates. So it was just one call I had with a potential property owner in that part of the world.
Are you talking about the Red Cross property?
Oh no, not the Red Cross property. No, that's essentially they're sort of redrawing their lot lines and potentially I think they may sell a portion of the site or something like that.
So this is another Crabs Branch property.
It's not a Crabs Branch property, correct? Yeah, it'll be much more large. It's much a bigger property than that one. And yeah, but besides that, I don't have anything else to in terms of any other new information that has either been submitted on the concept side or anything else that's on a near-term or longer-term horizon to share.
Okay, thank you. You did mention the connector project, if I understood correctly, and I put the link to that in the chat for those who are not already aware of it. So thank you for that.
Jeffrey, let me contribute to that connector project issue. This is a project that's very near and dear to Washington Grove. Yes. It's largely happening at our work over the years to get it into the planning process and then into actual study and funding. The meeting tomorrow night is a report of the 15% engineering study. So the county's been spending, believe it or not, more than a year on 15% design study. Probably didn't get started till summer. And they're going to be presenting this in a public forum in a public way for public comment. The study group, the Department of Transportation study group, was studying more than the direct connection to Washington Grove. I could show that on a map. The reason this is important, perhaps beyond just Washington Grove getting connected to the metro in a convenient multi-use shared pathway, is it also connects Gaithersburg. It connects both directions. People in Durwood will be able to ride and join the bike paths in Gaithersburg in a much more convenient way than currently possible on 355, et cetera, and vice versa. Gaithersburg will be able to access the bike paths in the South County, but also the metro by this path. So it's an important little segment. At the same time, they're also studying the connection between Crabs Branch, which currently just dead ends, just south of Washington Grove, or north of Washington Grove, south of Washington Grove, to Amity Drive, roughly, I don't know what, 700 yards or something away over undeveloped property. So they're also going to report on that. They were directed to study a shared bike connection between those two road ends, the end of Amity. But also, as we should all be familiar with, the Shady Grove Master Plan calls for the roads to be connected as part of a traffic plan for the area. It's been on the books, yes, since 2006, and has not been considered high enough priority to actually carry out. But now this DOT group the work was added to the group to also study a route for that road as well as a route for the shared use path. So all of those things come together, and we'll be finding out what they have done and what their concept is tomorrow night.
That's great, John. That's great background. Thank you. And kudos to your community for advocating for this. That's great. Wonderful. Wonderful.
It's only been 30 years or roughly. So if you feel frustrated in Durwood, it's, you're not alone here in the Up County with some of these. The wheels grind slowly when they grind at all. So
understood. Yeah, I respect that. Thank you. But seriously, congratulations. That's great news. Yeah. And so to all who are interested, please check out the link to the meeting. There is a registration link in the URL on the website. That's the Greater Washington Alliance site that I sent. But Montgomery County Department of Transportation did issue a news release on that. It's echoed in the link that I sent. Okay. We are after 9 o'clock. Any other updates or questions anyone wishes to share? Questions to Nkosi? Please go ahead, raise your hand or put them in the chat.
I have one more thing, just a little bit off of the master plan focus, but sure. The county is updating its hazard mitigation plan right now. Why is that important? Well, there was this pretty devastating train derailment in Ohio, and there's several on-grade crossings close to Washington Grove. There's several others further down along the CSX tracks, and that one issue is relevant, I think, through the Shady Grove metro area, as well as our community and some other communities. And I'm sure that that plan will look again at how it can be constructed and organized to provide additional assurances that there will be rapid action and communication should such a, God forbid, disaster happen in our neck of the woods. So that's going on right now. The county has no doubt an office. Washington Grove as a municipality is supposed to, and we do have a hazard mitigation plan that feeds into the county's plan. It's incorporated. So, which is why we have access to that. But if anyone has any interest in that, we can certainly put you in touch with those who are updating the hazard mitigation plan.
Thanks, John. Which division of the county is pursuing that update?
You're going to catch me flat-footed.
Okay.
I have emails from them. I'm just not remembering exactly.
The Office of Emergency Management.
Sorry?
I'll put a link in here. The Office of Emergency Management.
Oh, good, Aaron. Thanks. Yeah, you're on top of that activity that's going on.
Thanks, Aaron. That's especially helpful, given that Durwood is not a municipality, so we wouldn't have eyes on this perhaps as a municipality would, such as Washington Grove or Rockville for that matter. So, okay, Aaron, thank you very much. Other questions, items to raise? Shobana, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much. I wanted to mention that I am a member of Montgomery County's LEPC, and our meeting is next week. So I'm actually going to talk about this train issue because the train runs right behind the West Side development. And Aaron, this is where I'm getting to you. Is there any way you could help us to find out what are the allowable train speeds that that train can travel and during what times of the day and the night? It's very loud. It travels at high speeds at very, late nights. So it's a concern of some neighbors. And then as John mentioned, due to the train derailment, we're very concerned about that. So if we could get more information on that, I think that would be really helpful for our community over here.
Yeah, happy to do that. I will say, broadly speaking,
Yeah,
I could be wrong in some of the details of this, but because we've looked at train horn noise issues before, especially at grade crossings like in Washington Grove. This area is largely federal area.
Yeah.
But I can definitely look into your questions about speeds, noise restrictions, time restrictions. Almost 10 out of 10 times we look into a train issue, especially with CSX.
Yeah.
There is nothing the county can do. That doesn't mean that's true in this case, and I will of course find the information either way, but just want to let you know.
Well, I did, it's kind of my business, but I figured it was the Federal Railroad Administration. And when I looked up their regulations, it said they could travel 70 to 80 miles per hour under normal conditions. So, but yeah, any news you could give us would be great. Thanks again.
Shobana, what was the acronym you used? LEPC,
Local Emergency Planning Commission.
Ah, right. Okay. Not familiar to me. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Great. Okay. Okay. Anything else from anyone? Questions, updates to share? Okay. Seeing no hands and hearing no voices, I want to thank everyone for joining this evening, and again to Carrie Sanders to you for your presentation this evening and your valuable time and being with us for the length of the evening. Also to Ms. Stern for her time at the outset of our meeting, introducing herself. A real privilege to meet the acting director of Montgomery Planning. Aaron, thank you for attending this evening. And Nikosi, as always, thank you for the work you do with our committee and for our community. Very appreciative. Wish everyone a great evening. We'll convene on June 7th to welcome David Dice from Office of General Services. And we'll ask him questions about the bus depot. And in the meantime, I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wishes to be in touch with me. It's a privilege to serve as volunteer chair and work with everybody with everybody's different perspectives and contributions. Thank you all, and wish everyone a good evening and continued enjoyment of our great weather. Take care, everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.